So the next presentation is about it's an overview of grants management, and I would like to cover some integration points with finance. So please consider that the grants management is a full 2 weeks workshop. So we'll have to keep to miss some of the details, but I think it's more important if we address particular questions. My idea is to give you an overview and then to mention some points that I think are relevant for you as financial accounting people and finance LPs. So I will start right away with the end-to-end process. Are you ready? Now let me see how many people are listening to me. If you are ready, please click on the green check. All right. Okay, it's not bad. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Now let's see together this. Okay. So as a grants management overview. Okay. So what you see on your screen is a kind of end-to-end process for grants management. It has a lot of information because it's a good summary of it, but I'm going to explain to you one by one, and then we'll see later some of the key concepts that are involved in this process. Now, the first step that you see is setup of master data. In this case, the master data we are referring to is called grant. So the first thing that you need to be aware is that in the case of grants management, there is a master data that is called grant, and it contains all the information related to the donor agreement. So when there is a grant, we have an agreement between UN and a donor, and all this is stored in what is called grant, which is master data that is maintained by the GM user. After, in this grant, we will specify as well the amount of the grants in dollars, the scope of the project, etc. So there is a first process that is already integrated with the PEM, and you have to understand that all the grants management process is pretty much integrated with the PEM. There is the creation of what is called unreleased budget. So as part of the grants management process, the GM user will go and create a breakdown of the budget that is linked to the grant, and this budget will not be consumable. I see a bit this part, if you are more or less familiar with defense side, this part is a kind of appropriation, is similar to the appropriation phase in the sense that you are specifying already where you are dedicating where you are going to distribute the budget, but it's still not consumable. So there is the first phase for the creation of unreleased budget. So you are like saying, preparing the budget for the grant, but it's not yet usable. A third step that is very important is the creation of the cost object, or the cost, let's say the cost collector as well, you can call it. This is similar to what we saw in AUC. And in general, you have to create a project structure, work breakdown structure, or an internal order. There will be several of them. There will be some internal orders to collect revenue, to collect the contribution from the donor, so to collect the income, and then there will be internal order or a project to record and to track the expenses. All right. So here we will define different cost objects, if you want. Creation of the project or creation of internal orders. So we will first, just to recap, we will first have, UN will have a donor that may be a country that wants to contribute to one of the programs. There is an agreement. We create a grant that basically has most of the information of the agreement. Then we, let's say, prepare the budget for this grant, and we create the work breakdown structure that will serve as a basis for reporting on expenditures. At this moment, one question. At this moment, do you think it's possible to use funds or budget from the grant? Do you think at this moment, right after creating the project, that if you can use funds from the grant? Please click on yes or no. So obviously, at this moment, even though we have the unreleased budget, it's not possible to submit shopping carts and these kind of things, because still we don't have anything. Now, for this to happen, for shopping carts and fund commitments and other type of commitments, we need to have the budget released. Okay. And now, this is a bit tricky because the system will not force, let's say, the reception of the cash before the grant. So I have to explain something else there. So after we create the cost object, we have the billing process. This is not really a billing process. We call it billing process, but it's basically preparing, setting up the floor to receive the contribution from the donor. Can you hear me well? Can you please reply to me if you can hear me, or click on the green check? Are you there? Okay, thank you. So the billing process is another process of the grants management end-to-end cycle, where we are going to specify the customer and the amount that needs to be received. For example, if we have a grant for $1 million, we will, let's say, defining what sponsor classes we are going to use the money. Then we will have the project that has to be created and the internal order to receive the revenue. We will have the billing process, which will be generating the receivable in the sponsor, let's say, account in the business partner. And after, and only after we have received the cash, we should be creating the release budget. The release budget is a kind of interface between grants management and FM. So at the moment, as soon as we have the release budget, we will have budget also available in FM for commitments and other type of, for fund commitment, shopping carts, any type of earmarking funds, and any other type of expense. But please be aware of the following. In the system, it's possible to do the creation of the release budget, even if we have not received the cash from the donor. And that creates some problems that I'm going to explain later. But for you to remember, the moment that we have the release budget is when we can start executing the grant, in the sense that we can start raising shopping carts, using funds from the grant, having fund commitments, travel requests, any type of actual that we are going to create. Paying, processing invoices, payments, etc. So this is the phase where the grant spends most of its life. Right? Now we have some questions. So exactly. So the billing process, there is a question about billing process. It's mainly towards receiving funds donor. Yeah. This billing process is preparing the accounts to receive the contribution. So we are actually kind of billing the sponsor, because he has an agreement with us and is going to contribute with certain amounts. So we process the billing to receive it, to receive this money. Okay, is it clear? Yeah. So it is important that you understand what is the integration point with FM, because it's this release grant. When you process the creation of the release budget, you actually see two layers, GM ledger and FM ledger. So you are actually releasing the budget on the FM side as well. and then you have all the transactions. Eventually, after you complete it, they will close the grant. Now, this phase here of release the grant budget, it does not need to be only one shot. So if you have $1 million grant, maybe the unreleased budget is done in one shot, but maybe we release the budget in two shots, like 500,000 and then again 500,000 as well. Okay, is it clear? It is not happening all in one shot. If, for example, we are receiving the cash from the donor in different portions, then we can release the budget as we are receiving the cash. Because according to the business rules, you should not release more budget than you received from the cash, in terms of cash. Is it clear? Now you'll see here something about framework 1 and framework 2. I will explain to you later. But is it clear this end-to-end process? We create the grant that contains the donor agreement. We prepare, let's say, the budget for the grant, like in which way we are going to, let's say, distribute the money. Again, in the same way as it happens in FM, when you have a donor agreement, maybe you are receiving funds for you to, let's say, build something, but then you are not allowed to spend this money on IT equipment. So all this is going to be specified in the same way as we do in FM, that we have commitment item classes. In GM, you will have what is called a sponsor classes. Now we'll see all the terminology. So we create the grant, we create the unreleased budget, which is a kind of proposal. Then we create the project. Then we have the billing to get funds and to get the contribution from the donor. Then we have the release of the budget in several shots normally. And from there, we have grant execution, and then we can raise shopping carts. All right, I know it's a very high level overview, but is it clear? Do you get, because now if you understand the general idea, I can go into more details step by step. Please click on the green check if it's clear. And if you click on the red cross, I will ask you also to ask me a question so I know where to focus. Right, please click on the green check if possible. All right, I think it's quite okay. Yeah. All right, so let's continue with this overview. But all right, now if you understood this one, I want to tell you something about this whole process, because I know you are getting sometimes errors when you are processing payments or invoices that are related to grants, and you need to understand a new concept that I actually explained already in Cubase when I was in one of the last workshops. So you need to understand, now that we are using grants, what are the different control ledgers that we have in the system. So, okay, let me just put the slide so I can edit it while I'm talking. So before in Foundation, when you were not using grants, you had what we used to call a FM control ledger. So we have, okay, one second, FM control. All right, FM control is something that you understood and you understand very easily, because it's about your budget. For example, if this box or if this rectangle is representing your budget, right? And let's say that we have a certain amount of budget that I'm going to represent with a green color. Give me one second. Okay. So if this is your budget, okay, I'm representing with green. This green box is your budget, where you are incurring expenses, and I'm going to represent the expenses in red. Okay, So let's say you have this amount of budget, but it could be maybe 1 million. Okay, please be with me. So I mean, I think this is interesting for you to know. So let's say that we have in our mission an allotment of $1 million to make it a round number. So we got $1 million as an allotment. Okay, this is our allotment. So we have it here, and then we start expending money. So this is in red. It will be let's say the expenditure. So let me put it in red. So now let's say that we spent $200,000. No, sorry, yeah, 200,000. Okay. Now, will you have, if you expend $200,000 and you want to spend more money, will you have any budget error? No, you don't have any budget error, right? Because you still have available budget. Everybody in finance understands very well. Okay. Now, let's say that we continue spending and our actual grows to up to $500,000. Do you have any budget error? No, you don't have any budget error. And then you continue, and then let's say that you have $9,000. And then you want to commit, all of a sudden you want to commit $200,000. You will get budget error because you cannot go beyond your available budget, right? Does this make sense? Do you remember integration with FM? And is it clear that you cannot go beyond your allotment? And why you cannot go beyond your allotment? Because there is something that is called budget control, and this is in the FM ledger. Can you please click on the green check if this is clear? I know this is very basic, but now don't worry that the following example will confuse you because it's more complex. Okay, and then where is normally in FM the control? It is defined at commitment item class level. So you define it at class level, meaning that as long as you have funds in this fund center, but for the class, you will not have any error. Like this, the point of having, if you have funds in class 100, you can go ahead raising shopping carts, and the system will not give you any error. Now, what happens when we involve GM on this process? So this is only FM. Okay, let me just make this smaller because I need space for the other diagrams. Now, when you have something related to grants, you have more control ledgers. Apart from the FM ledger that you know how to check, and you know how to check with FM ABC R02, you have another ledger that is GM. It's a kind of GM ledger. Now, when you have a grant and you have a donor agreement, the donor agreement can be more specific than we normally have in the assessed funds. In the assessed funds, normally you get an allotment for a given fund center, and you have it for a particular type of expense. But if you, instead of spending money on one thing, you spend it in another thing, as long as it's within the same commitment item class, normally you don't have a budget error, right? If they give you money to acquire, I don't know, cables, and then you are acquiring laptops, if it's all under the same class, you don't have such a problem. But now with the grant, you have another, let's say, control ledger that could be more specific. So instead of at commitment class, so instead of at commitment item class, it can be defined at commitment item level. So or instead of a super class like the class 100, it can be done at only at the class level. So the level of control can be more specific. Could be different, or could be more specific. And then, even though you see the funds available in the FM, you could get errors. I don't want to get too much techie here, but what you need to understand is that when the GM is involved, you may have the situation that you don't get FM budget error, but you get GM error. Because, for example, maybe this $1 million was for any commitment item under class 100, but in the grant, you may get it not anything under class 100, but only under class 150. So if you are under class 150, it's still under class 100, so you will not get FM error, but you will get GM error. All right? This is not for you to get a perfect idea of how the grants work, but to open your eyes and let you know that apart from the regular budget availability control errors that you are used to get, you may get budget exceeded, but then when you see the error, instead of telling you FM, it's telling you GM. So if you don't have FM but you have GM error, people tend to get confused because they go to FM ABCR02 and they want to see the budget available. But if you go to FM ABCR02, if you go with FM ABCR02, what are you looking at is the FM availability control. There is another T code to see the GM control. I don't remember right now the T code by heart, but I can send it to you by email. I mean, together with the presentation after this session. So my point is, when you have grants involved, be aware of the other control ledger. Okay? Do you get my point? Can you please click on the green check or ask questions if I need to explain it better? To make it a very stupid example, all right? Imagine that you could have technically in FM control ledger, you have money to buy furniture, but in the GM control ledger, you may have used this money only for chairs, right? So I know it doesn't apply exactly, but this is the difference. Your GM control may be more restrictive than the FM control ledger. So in FM, you have this money, whatever falls under operations, it's fine, you spend it. But in GM, you may have, okay, it's not for anything. You can only use it for transport, and you can only use it for construction materials, for example. All right. Yeah. So this is one of the points. And then another one that is very important for you, and is my main goal here in this session of grants management, is to make you aware of another control that normally you don't experience in the day-to-day activities when there are no grants involved. It's the cash control. In general, when you are running your daily operations in the mission, there is, you know, that the cash is centralized, and there is the cash pool where every mission has its own, let's say, share. When it comes to grants, there is an extra cash control, and I need another slide for this. And why is that? This is, sorry, I will put it in a different slide. So you have cash control because one thing is the budget that you release, and another thing is the cash that you already received from the donor. For example, if you have a donor agreement from $1 million, how would you receive the money? Would you receive the 100% of the contribution the first day? When would you receive the contribution? So there is a full process there to release the budget. So let's say now I'm not talking about yet about expenditure. Let's say that we start the project and we don't have any expenditure yet. Now the full project is for is $1 million. Okay. So we have the project and we go through this process. $1 million. We set up the master data. We create the grant. And we have the donor agreement. We put all the information there. Then we create unreleased budget. And in unreleased budget, we say, okay, with $1 million, we are going to put 200,000 for acquiring this type of materials, 200,000 on this class, 300,000 in this other class to pay this new staff member, etc. You create the project and you have the billing. Now, let's say that you have to start the project and you want to release budget, but you didn't receive yet the cash from the donor. Can you raise shopping carts? I'm asking you in this scenario. Can you raise shopping carts? You cannot raise shopping carts because you don't have any budget yet, right? So in theory, what should happen is that while you receive the cash, if you receive, let's say $200,000 in cash, then you can release $200,000 of your budget. If you follow this approach, you will not have any problem because your budget release will be aligned with the cash that you receive. But in the system, it is possible, even though it's absolutely against the, let's say, against the business process, it is possible to release a higher amount. So maybe you can release 700,000, so you can start processing shopping carts and initiating the process because you trust that you are going to receive the cash, right? But if this happens, if the budget is higher than the cash, when we will reach payments, you may have cash problems. So you may go ahead because you know your grant is for $1 million, so you can start releasing, and eventually maybe you can even release everything and you start processing shopping carts and processing everything. But then when you reach the moment of the payment, cashiers will get confused because cashiers will get cash control errors and they will not understand why. And then people will go to the budget and they will not understand why is the problem. And the problem is that you didn't receive the cash completely from the donor. So if you start generating expenditures and your expenditures go beyond the cash that you have, you will start getting cash errors until the level of cash related to this grant will reach the total amount of the budget. Okay? Does this make sense? Can you please click on the green check if you get the idea of the cash control and budget? This doesn't happen really in the assessed fund because you have your cash that is available and it's related to the appropriation and the budget. So normally when it comes to assessed funds, it's more or less aligned. So is it clear? Any question? Please ask question if you didn't understand. I know I'm going straight to the point, but you are local process expert, right? So I can assume that some of the things are clear. So there is a question about the different levels of control. The first question is if there is any replication between these two levels in order to eliminate this kind of errors by Umoja. Now, there is not a replication because the type, this is not really an error. The point is that if you are managing grants, to see what budget you have available, you should not go with FMABCR02. You should go with the specific for grants, because the budget control that is applied on the FM side is not aligned maybe with the grants. So maybe the budget control that you have in the FM side maybe is the one that is defined by the, I don't know, by the office of the controller. I don't know who is defining that. But this level of control, the level of control in the grant is defined by the donor. So if I'm Japan and I'm contributing with $1 million and I don't want you to use a single dollar from my contribution on paying travels, I can define the budget control at the commitment item class level more specific. So you will not have FM error, because maybe from FM perspective it's fine, but it's GM. So the message is, if you have a grant and you have budget errors, go and check the budget availability control on the GM side, not on the FM. And the same for the cash. If you have cash errors, check if it's related to a grant, because maybe maybe the GM user was releasing too much budget before you got the contribution from the donor. You're asking me about the T code for the GM control. Before sending the presentation, I will enrich it, so I will put it here because I have it in my list of favorites, and I didn't have time to check it. And also for cash control, there is another T code that I will copy into this slide. So, but thank you for the question. So I will complete this before sending it to you. So there is a question: when in cashier we usually face this problem when generating payments related to grants. Yeah, and I think this session is very useful for cashiers. All cashiers that are involved in cash payments that are related to grants may experience this. So you have to follow up with your GM users, because it should not be the case, and actually it's against the policy, that they release budget without having the cash. So if they don't release the budget, then they will get GM errors. Sometimes it happens, they are getting GM errors, they don't understand why, so they come here and they release budget. But you are releasing budget without receiving the cash. The system will let you go ahead on the FM side, but cash control will stop you before doing the disbursement, because you don't have cash, you didn't receive it. All right? Another question. Okay, will the system accept overspending before the whole budget is received? This is the point. This is a question from, okay, thank you, Jackson, for your question. The point is that you don't receive budget. What you receive is cash. So the system will allow you to spend as much money as you receive. And when I say spend, I mean you will be able, if the GM user releases budget, you can go ahead with the POs. You can go ahead with the good receipt, but you can never pay for it because you don't have the cash. That's why it's recommended from the business owner that only budget release is done when the cash is received. So if you receive half of the cash, do not release 100% of the budget. That's the point. All right. Any question? I think these 3 slides are useful for you to get an idea. This is really the integration between the 3 different ledgers. Okay. Can you please click on the green check if you are satisfied with the explanation, and I can go ahead. And the rest of the presentation is really key terminology and this kind of thing that is going to be more boring for you, but at least you get familiar with the terminology, because if you realize this is the problem, then you have to talk to a GM local process expert, and then you need to understand its own terminology. Okay, thank you. Thank you. So let's continue then. Let's continue. So why is UN needs grants management? So you have donors, and you have United Nations, and you have grantees, which are basically how you call it, implementing partners. So you have a donor that contributes in dollars, and the United Nations is providing reporting to the donors. On the other side, if we have implementing partners, we contribute with a portion to implementing partners, and they will report to us. So this is other UN agencies, NGOs, like this type of situations. So a grantee is the entity that is receiving the money, let's say, and grantor is the one that is. So you will find sometimes the term sponsor, sometimes the term grantor. Okay, it's pretty much the same thing from our perspective. Okay, what else we have here? Okay, this is what I just mentioned. So what is the impact of IPSAS on these voluntary contributions? So recognition of the revenue. Unconditional donations are recorded as revenue upon signing the donor agreement. So this part is what we cover with an internal order that is for revenue, and then we have the billing, which is actually like debiting the GL, the corresponding accounts receivable, to get the revenue. Okay. Okay, this is just information for your reference. Yeah, maybe this is interesting. So grants management is a very complex module because it's integrated with pretty much a lot of things. So it integrates with project systems, because for a grant we need to create the work breakdown structure. So we have to create a project, let's say, to track all the transactions if they are related to what part of the project. It's related to grants management because we create the grants on this module. It's related to controlling because then we have internal order as well, and we are collecting the costs. It's related to sales and distribution because we are billing the sponsor to get the contribution. Is linked to finance and treasury because we are going to collect this, let's say, income. It's linked to financial accounting because we have to track all these transactions, and this will mean that we will have some posting in FI. It's linked to FM because once we release the budget, it's also visible on the FM ledger. And it's linked to other modules like procurement because we can raise purchase orders using funds from the grant, so meaning using the WBS element that we have been using. And yeah, it's linked to, for the expenditure, it's also linked to financial accounting because we are tracking all the expenses. Okay, this is the agenda from the previous. So those are three new concepts that I may need to explain to you. A grant, I already mentioned, is like master data that contains basically the donor agreement. All right. Sponsor program is similar to the funded program. So if you know what is a funded program, you already know what's sponsor program. Now, I think I have the definitions in the following slides. The grant, I can skip it. Anyway, you have for your reference, this slide. Grants, you can have 4 types of grants. I don't want to get into detail because this is more for GM users, but you can have a simple grant when you have only one donor. So if you see an identifier for the grant that starts with S, it's a simple grant, you only have one donor. If you see an R grant, it's because there are multiple donors contributing to the same project. If you have an M grant, is because there are multiple contributors, so you have a combination of resource mobilization and implementation. And you see a P grant, is because there is implementing partner, but this is just general information for you. I don't want to get into this because it's for GM, so let me just skip some slides. Difference between Framework 1 and Framework 2 is not important for you in terms of integration. They integrate in the same way. Maybe an example of Framework 1, it could be useful. So Framework 1, it's you have a simple grant, you only one donor, and then you can have some implementing partners and also another portion that is implemented by event. This is what they call Framework 1. Okay, this is just for the selection. Okay. Another important concept for grants management, but I don't think you need to get into this, is the concept of indirect costs. Okay, so grants management data includes IDC, which is indirect cost, which is like a percentage for admin, for example, for admin fees or only or any other indirect costs that UN is incurring for the management of the grant. It's also what is called, I think, PSC, program support cost. Okay, this is also something that is managed in the grants management module. Sponsor program. This one I think is more interesting for you if you understand what is a funded program. So a sponsor program is a master data that represents the project, or let's say the purpose of the contribution. So if you have a project for an asset under construction, the system creates a funded program. If you have a grant, then you have a sponsor program, like it's a way of identifying in grants management the full program well the grant is fitting. And the most interesting one is sponsor class. Sponsor class is like the brother or the sister of the commitment item class. If you know what is a commitment item class, that is basically the nature of the expenditure. You have the same concept in GM, which is called sponsor class. So if one, let's say, if you have a donor agreement with a country, and the country wants to contribute with $1 million, they will also specify what classes, what commitment item classes are sponsored. So in this case, instead of calling them commitment item classes, they are calling them sponsor classes. So and this is what I meant before. They will specify if they are contributing for staff costs or other type of costs. So they will define if it's for staff or if it's for supplies commodity, if it's for equipment, if it's for contractual services, etc. And this is important because if in the grant the control is defined at this level, so the money that the budget that they are or the cash they are giving to you, it's only for supplies, commodities, and vehicles, or materials. If you try to raise shopping carts for equipment or for vehicles, you will get GM budget error. So a sponsor class is a kind of similar thing to commitment item class, but in GM. So okay, you can have some income sponsor class and some expenditures sponsor classes. So this one should be more or less aligned with commitment item classes. Okay, staff, personnel, supply, communication, equipment, vehicle, contract services, travel, other costs, etc. All right, then GM related master data element, nothing new. This is just some explanation about that you can use work breakdown structure, internal orders. But I think I already explained what is important in terms of integration. So let me just take a quick look to the rest of the presentation to see if I have to explain something. If you never worked with projects before, you can take a look to slide 38. So basically the work breakdown structure is like a breakdown of the project itself, so you can identify if you are incurring expenditures to what part of the project you are contributing. If this is a project to build, let's say, to develop a village, you will have water renovation, water facilities, or plumbing renovation. You may have different parts of the project, so you need to report in what part of the project the money was spent. All right. I don't think I will remove these slides because I think they are good for your general understanding. This one may be useful because it's talking exactly about the integration between grants and other modules. So you see a sponsor class is aligned with commitment item and commitment item classes. All right, fund is the same thing, grant is the same thing. And then sponsor program, it's identifying basically the same thing of the funded program. And for the rest, is okay. And yeah, basically that's more details about every single step that I don't think we need to get into that. So from my point of view, I think we are fine with the presentation. Now I leave you again the floor if you have any question. If any of these slides ring the bell, so let me know if you have something to ask that you were holding. Otherwise, I think we are going to leave it here. Is there any question? Please write it on the Q&A. If you think this one was useful as well, just also let me know. So I'll send the presentation at the end with these T codes. Okay, no questions. All right. So thank you very much for attending this session. I know I have stolen almost 4 hours of your working day, so I'm sorry for that. If you had to stay until late and you have to do overtime because of these sessions. Okay. I hope they were useful for you as well. And there is only one more that we will deliver tomorrow. It's based on travel, and I think I will join. But because it's going to be managed by one of my colleagues. But if I'm not here tomorrow for any reason, I want to thank you all for putting your energy again in trying to understand whatever I say. Thank you so much, and also for your kind words, and have a lovely evening, and see you around. You can always write to me if you want to discuss anything offline. Thank you so much. Thank you. Have a good afternoon. Have a good evening. I appreciate all your patience with me today. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.